First of all, welcome to our summit.
It is great being here.
I so appreciate you joining us today.
Let me tell you, first of all, any invitation that I get from Jonathan, the answer is going to be yes. I have, and yeah, we can give a round of applause on that. I've adored this man and his leadership for a very, very long time. I'm thankful to not just call you a colleague in the work, but to call you a friend.
Yep.
And I'm really proud of you. And I'm really thankful for this organization and the work that you do.
Thanks.
So I'm humbled for the invitation, and I'm humbled to be your partner today, tomorrow, and beyond. Because
nice.
Together we're gonna win.
For those who don't know, Wes is a decorated veteran. He's a best-selling author. He's the former CEO of Robin Hood Foundation, an organization focused on poverty alleviation in New York City. And so he brings an understanding of the public sector and the military and the private sector to this role today. So talk to us a bit about your vision for Maryland. What does it mean to have a state that's free of hate and extremism? Share with us.
I knew coming in that the number one responsibility for any chief executive is making sure that everybody in your state can feel safe in their own homes, safe in their own communities, and safe in their own skin. Right? And part of what that means is that, and part of what that means is we will create a Maryland where every single person in our state knows that they should never be harmed nor feel fearful about something that they are both not responsible for and B, that they should not be ashamed of. Mm-hmm. That every single Marylander should know that this is going to be a state that is going to protect them.
Bravo.
And it was one of the reasons why, as soon as we saw the data that came out, that ADL published, and I want to give a special shout out to Meredith. I'm not sure where she is. Who, by the way, I want to apologize because I called her like 10 o'clock at night. When I first saw this data, I called her and I said, listen, I didn't even want the day to cross over before giving you a phone call to let her know that first how horrified I was to see my state. Yeah. My state, to see the numbers that we saw. And I think we were like in week 1 of our administration. And to say that, we are going to be very vocal and very aggressive partners in this. And it's the reason why literally as the sun came up the next morning, we had our statement ready to go that you shared. Yeah. But letting Marylanders know that not only were we going to be a state that was going to be welcoming, a state where everyone is seen and heard, a state where everyone is protected, but also we are very clear to those who want to violate the civil rights and the independence of individuals there, that your actions will not be tolerated in our state.
Bravo.
And so we want to be very clear on that.
Well, let's talk about what it means to kind of partner with ADL or other NGOs in this work. How do you envision that happening? What's the role of the state versus civil society in fighting this scourge?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I really love about having ADL as a partner in this is I think we understand that this is going to be a two-front battle that we're going to take on. One is that there are going to be ways that we have to zero in on increasing education, increasing exposure, and being very forthright about what type of state we are and how we are going to be a state that actually honors history and not ignores it. That we are going to be a state that actually lifts up our history and our foundation and understands that when we say things like never again, people have to understand, what do we mean by that? Yeah. And what is it about that we're saying never again can happen again? And so this is about how can we reinforce education, and there's things that we're working on right now that I'd love to go into about things that we're doing to do that. Another thing that we're working on is being able to honor the past. So for example, in the state of Maryland, I signed a bill where January 27th in perpetuity, not just while I'm governor, in perpetuity, is now going to be Holocaust Remembrance Day. And because it's important for people to understand history and not to have that history blocked and not to have that history wiped off to the side as if it didn't happen. But I think there's a second piece where the partnering really matters too. Dr. King actually had a quote, which I love, and he says, laws don't change the heart, but laws protect me from the heartless. right? Laws don't change the heart, but laws can protect me from the heartless. And so we understand that this is also about laws.
Yeah.
This is also about strengthening hate crime policy, and it's the reason why, for example, in our first days of office, we submitted a budget that now has become law, our budget, which increased hate crime prevention funding by $5 million in the state of Maryland.
Bravo.
And going towards hardening of infrastructure. It's the reason that we put $122 million additional dollars into supporting for local law enforcement.
Amazing.
And so making sure that our homes of worship and our places can be safe and people can feel protected when they're going out and worshiping. It's the reason that we're passing laws in our first legislative session around things like anti-swatting, around things like, actually creating a hardened commission that's going to focus on how are we looking at hate crimes as a whole. And so these are all things that we knew that it's going to be both a combination of how are we increasing education, but also how are we increasing and strengthening laws so that people can feel protected in their own communities.
So, you just touched on something, Governor Moore, that I want to reference, because we think a lot about fighting hate in the sanctuaries, the sacred spaces where we pray or where we worship. But for those who don't know, he is a veteran and he's a governor. He's also a husband and a father, 2 young kids, a little bit younger than mine. We were talking about this in the back, about online harassment and about online hate, which we know is a problem. And you just alluded to this law, the Anti-Swatting Act, that makes it a crime, if you will, to make false statements.
Yes.
Talk to us a little about your views about online hate and harassment, both as, again, a governor and also maybe as a father, and what you guys plan on doing about it in Maryland.
This is this is important and it's complicated.
Yeah.
Where, I understand when people are talking about the importance of free speech and First Amendment. I completely understand the argument.
Yeah.
But when your free speech makes me and everyone else less safe, that's no longer free speech. That's very expensive and it's very deadly.
Yeah. Here.
And so while people can make an argument, well, we're not bolstering, we're just simply giving platform. The challenge is that the data does not reinforce that argument. Because even being able to allow this type of language and hate to foment and grow and recruit, you are then by definition making individuals and making children less safe in their own personal environments. And so I do think that we need to have a greater level of responsibility of the tools that we are unleashing on our society with a clear understanding of their consequences. We do need to have consequences when people misuse those tools. It's the same reason, frankly, where, again, you can believe in free speech, but there's certain things I can't yell fire in a movie theater.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we essentially have these online tools that are creating platforms for people to scream verbal fire in movie theaters.
Yep.
So we have a collective responsibility as a state to say that we're not just simply going to hide behind the idea of everyone can say anything they want because it's just a reinforcement of First Amendment right. Not if what you are doing is literally making people less safe every single day. Right. There is a responsibility that we have to lean into this. There's a responsibility that we have to move in partnership in it. But we cannot just allow this to grow and fester and say, well, it's just simply because we respect the First Amendment. I respect people's lives more.
Bravo. So, in full disclosure, I've known Governor Moore for maybe 15 years, and one of the things I've always loved about him is, I think about the work here, and we talk about fighting hate, but we've also got to build hope. Yeah. You need a yin and a yang. You need a balance in order to win this war. And Wes, you always bring the hope. And we first met around the issue of service. Yeah. So after you wrote your first book, and you have been such a champion of this. Talk about the role of service as a strategy in Maryland, because you've got some exciting things you've already gotten done. Yeah. Here, I think pretty cool. And how you think about building hope more generally.
I remember when I was running Robin Hood, and we were working on a policy issue that was about child poverty with the child tax credit, adjustment to the child tax credit. And I remember we were trying to work with a former governor to try to get them to make the child tax credit permanent, because it's one of the most effective ways you can actually fight child poverty. And we worked with them for 6 months. I literally wrote the line in the State of the State that he could say. And when I got an advance copy of the State of the State, I saw there wasn't a single mention of child tax credit nor child poverty inside that speech. So I was a little bit upset. I call up my head of public policy at Robin Hood, who's still there, but at the time, and I said, listen, and I'm going on this diatribe. And he said to me, he said, listen, we worked for 6 months to try to get them to include a line in the speech.
Yeah.
And he said, but what if you could write the whole speech? And that's the point. And 2 weeks after being inaugurated as the 63rd governor of Maryland, I gave the speech that I wanted to give.
Bravo.
And in that speech, the theme around it was, service will save us. Service will save us. And it goes back to the idea that we believe that if you can create a cohesive environment where people are working together, where people are learning from each other, that is the best and the fastest way for us to be able to address this massive divide that continues to pull us apart. And so it's one of the reasons why I was very proud. One of the first bills that we proposed 10 bills in this legislative session, went 10 for 10 for the bills we proposed, and by the way, got all 10 passed bipartisan, every single one of the bills. But one of the bills that we proposed and got passed is a bill called the SERVE Act. And what the SERVE Act does is, Maryland is now the first state in this country that offers a service year option for our high school graduates, where our high school graduates can choose whatever area to serve in that they choose to if they opt to, right?
What would be some examples of that?
So they can work in the environment, and we say, we just want them to do whatever makes their heart beat a little bit faster, right? So it can work in the environment, it can be early childhood, it can be reentry, they can work with veterans, they can work on combating hate crimes, right? Whatever it is that they choose to do, and we're doing it for a few different reasons. One reason is I'm a big believer in experiential learning. Give young people a chance to learn what it is they want to do, and then give them the platform and the pathway for them to be able to do it. The second reason, this provides a measure of a financial cushion for every one of our students, because we know that oftentimes life gets in the way as students are thinking about making this transition. But the third reason, and the big reason, it's because service is sticky. Those who serve together generally stay together. And in this time of political divisiveness and vitriol, it is service that's going to save us. And I think about it in context where, I remember when I was running for governor, I had people who I served with in Afghanistan who came and door knocked for my campaign. Many of them were not Marylanders. Many of them weren't Democrats.
Right.
But they came and campaigned on my behalf, and they were simply knocking on doors, and they were just saying, let me tell you about the guy that I served with. Service is sticky, and service will save us. And I think about this also where people say, well, it's such a novel idea and it's so different, this idea of serving and that helps to build up a sense of national cohesion and helping people to get to know each other. And I said, it's novel for a state to do it. And I believe that Maryland, not only is Maryland the first state, Maryland will not be the last. But do you know who's also done it before? Israel.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And other nations who understand the importance of service in helping to build a stronger civil society.
Yeah.
And I want Marylanders to serve, because when I say that this is going to be Maryland's decade, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But the reason that I mean that, and the reason I know it's going to be true, is because we are going to make sure that there are 6.2 million fingerprints that are going to be on the future of our state.
So awesome. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, Governor Moore is the real deal. We are lucky to have him in our corner. I wish you, all of us wish you the best of luck in building the best state you can.
God
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and